Speaks is one of the most remarkable works of channeled information in history. It is the product of a process that began when Jane Roberts received what she called her psychic initiation one evening in September 1963 as she sat writing poetry. As she explained it, quote, "Suddenly my consciousness left my body, and my mind was barraged by ideas that were astonishing and new to me at the time," unquote. Because of that experience, Miss Roberts and her husband, Robert Butts, started doing research into psychic activity and planning a book. In line with their research, they began experimenting with a Ouija board. After the first few sessions, the pointer spelled out messages that claimed to come from a personality calling himself Seth. As neither Miss Roberts or her husband had any psychic background, they initially presumed that the messages were coming from Miss Roberts' subconscious. However, she soon began to feel compelled to speak these messages aloud, and the Ouija board became redundant as, within a month, she was easily passing into trance and speaking for Seth while in a trance state. Seth communicated in twice-weekly sessions, in the process developing a continuing manuscript that would ultimately total over 6,000 typewritten pages. From those pages, Miss Roberts first compiled a book titled The Seth Material. Then, on January 19, 1970, Seth announced that he would be dictating a book of his own. The dictation began 2 days later on January 21st and was concluded on August 11, 1971. An appendix was added over the following 6 weeks. The title that Seth gave to his book was Seth Speaks, The Eternal Validity of the Soul. In it, he discusses a vast range of subjects in a text that is so voluminous we cannot hope to reproduce it here in its entirety. Therefore, we have focused on some specific aspects and areas of various key issues. Among them, the identity and multidimensional aspect of the soul, consciousness, death and after-death experiences, dreams, reincarnation, Christ, his crucifixion, and the second coming, the nature of God and of good and evil, the rise and fall of civilizations that preceded Atlantis, and how a brotherhood of speakers has worked throughout history to preserve the essential knowledge of humankind. The information within this program is challenging, thought-provoking, sometimes controversial. We are sure you'll agree that it is also, in the truest sense of the word, remarkable. What you are about to hear are the words of Seth, as spoken by Jane Roberts and transcribed by her husband, Robert Butts, and narrated on this recording by Scott Turchin. As we begin, Seth speaks about himself, his environment, the nature of reality, and the nature of ourselves.
You have heard of ghost hunters. I can quite literally be called a ghost writer, though I do not approve of the term ghost. It is true that I am usually not seen in physical terms. I do not like the word spirit either. Yet, if your definition of that word implies the idea of a personality without a physical body, then I would have to agree that the description fits me. I address an unseen audience. However, I know that they exist, and therefore I shall ask each of them, now, to grant me the same privilege. I communicate with you through the auspices of a woman of whom I have become quite fond. To others it seems strange that I address her as Rupert and him, but the fact is that I have known her in other times and places by other names. Names are not important, however. My name is Seth. Names are simply designations, symbols, and yet, since you must use them, I shall also. I write this with the cooperation of Rupert, who speaks the words for me. In this life, Rupert is called Jane, and her husband, Robert Butts, takes down the words that Jane speaks. I call him Joseph. You may suppose that you are physical creatures, bound within physical bodies, imprisoned within bone, flesh, and skin. If you believe that your existence is dependent upon this corporeal image, then you feel in danger of extinction. No physical form lasts, and no body, however beautiful in youth, retains the same vigor and enchantment in old age. If you identify with your own youth, or beauty, or intellect, or accomplishments, then there is the constant gnawing knowledge that these attributes can and will vanish. I am speaking to assure you that this is not the case. Basically, you are no more of a physical being than I am, and I have donned and discarded more bodies than I care to tell. I am quite independent of a physical image, and so are you. Consciousness creates form. It is not the other way around. All personalities are not physical. It is only because you are so busily concerned with daily matters that you do not realize that there is a portion of you who knows that its own powers are far superior to those shown by the ordinary self. You have each lived other existences, and that knowledge is within you, though you are not consciously aware of it. I hope that this will serve to release the deeply intuitive self within each of you, and to bring to the foreground of consciousness whatever particular insights will serve you most. I speak to those who believe in a God, and those who do not, to those who believe that science will find all answers as to the nature of reality, and to those who do not. I hope to give you clues that will enable you to study the nature of reality for yourself as you have never studied it before. There are several things that I shall ask you to understand. You are not stuck in time like a fly in a closed bottle whose wings are therefore useless. You cannot trust your physical senses to give you a true picture of reality. They are lovely liars, with such a fantastic tale to tell that you believe it without question. You are sometimes wiser, more creative, and far more knowledgeable when you are dreaming than when you are awake. I am primarily a personality with a message. You create the world that you know. You have been given perhaps the most awesome gift of all, the ability to project your thought outward into physical form. The fact is that each of you creates your own physical reality, and en masse, you create both the glories and the terrors that exist within your earthly experience. Until you realize that you are the creators, you will refuse to accept this responsibility. Consciousness is a way of perceiving the various dimensions of reality. Consciousness as you know it is highly specialized. The physical senses allow you to perceive the three-dimensional world, and yet by their very nature they can inhibit the perception of other equally valid dimensions. Most of you identify with your daily, physically oriented self. You do not identify with the inner portion of yourselves. You prefer to identify with the part of you who watches television, or cooks, or works, the part you think knows what it is doing. But the seemingly unconscious portion of yourself is far more knowledgeable, and upon its smooth functioning your entire physical existence depends. This portion is conscious, aware, alert. I call it the inner ego, for it directs inner activities. It correlates information that is perceived not through the physical senses, but through other inner channels. It is the inner perceiver of reality that exists beyond the three-dimensional. It carries within it the memory of each of your past existences. The outer ego and the inner ego operate together, the one to enable you to manipulate in the world that you know, the other to bring you those delicate inner perceptions without which physical existence could not be maintained. There is, however, a portion of you, the deeper identity, who forms both the inner ego and the outer ego, who decided that you would be